Okay, so good afternoon, guys. So today we're going to be looking at dependency injection, right? We're going to be looking at dependency injection in Android, but of course, I want to believe some of you have heard about this or probably even used it, right? But okay, as usual, I wouldn't want to assume that you know it, right? So we'll just get to look into dependency injection for today, and what we'll cover today, we'll get to look at what dependency injection is all about. We'll also get to look at what it involves, the benefits, the types of dependency injection, right? And then some of the frameworks that exists for us to actually make use of this. So let's just head straight into it, right? So dependency injection, DI, right? It's just a design pattern, right? That's commonly used in software development. So this definition is not from the Android perspective, but more generic stuff, right? But it's basically used to manage and provide dependencies to other objects, right? So we don't let objects to create their dependencies themselves, right? So what we do is we create a dependency in an abstract class somewhere else, right? And then objects can actually just what get that dependency what and make use of it rather than creating it themselves. And of course, these dependencies could be objects themselves, it could be services, right? So that's basically dependency injection. It's just a design pattern, or you can call it an architectural concept. What so it basically just facilitates that management and provision of dependencies, which, like I said, could be objects or it could be services to other parts of your application. So let's look at it from an Android perspective or an application perspective. So there are parts of your application which that probably needs a particular dependency, right, to function. So this DI actually just it's just a pattern, right, that provisions that dependency when it is needed to other parts of the what application. So the core idea, right, of dependency injection is to kind of invert the responsibility of creating and managing dependencies from the dependent class to an external entity. So basically, it just helps to improve the whole modularity, right? Testability. We'll talk about these things, right? More like the benefits, but it helps to improve modularity, testability, maintainability, and of course, flexibility of your code base, right? Because the thing is this, know this in Android, dependencies can be um, objects, like I said, services, it can be configurations, right? So they include other classes, services, configurations, resources, or any object at all that a component relies on to perform its what functionality, right? So that's basically the concept of dependency injection, right? Like I usually like to do, and I usually tell my students, right? Sometimes if you get the literal meaning of a word, right, it helps you to understand, to a great extent what it is in a particular context. So when you look at the word dependency, to depend on something means something is depending on another thing to what function. And of course, injection means okay, fine, you want to actually what put this in. So you're injecting this dependency, right? That's just looking at it from a literal meaning, right? So let's look at some key concepts, right? Key concepts in DI. The first thing there is dependency. Now, a dependency is an object, right, that another class depends on to perform its tasks. That's what a dependency is. It's actually an object, right, that another class depends on to perform its task. So your dependencies can actually be classes, it can be interfaces, it can be services or other objects that provide a specific functionality. Okay, so that's what a dependency what is. Now, the client class is just the class that depends on a particular dependency. So any class that depends on a dependency to function, that's the client class. And then of course the injector, or what we call the container, this is actually responsible for creating and providing the necessary dependencies to the client class. Of course, you can actually manage it manually by yourself, like manually, or use a dependency injection framework, which we'll look at towards the end of this slide, right? So these are the concepts of DI. The dependency, which, like I said, is just an object that another class depends on to perform its task. The client class is a class that depends on a particular dependency for it to actually function, right? or carry out its task, right? And then the injector, or you can call it a container, that is what is responsible for creating and providing the necessary dependencies to the client's what classes. Okay. Now moving on, right? Um, let's look at the benefits. So I actually just hinted at that, the benefits of DI. So the first one is modularity. Now, modularity actually promotes modular design, right? Dependency rather, DI actually promotes modular design, right? And this is just ensuring that components are kind of loosely coupled and they can be easily replaced or updated without affecting the rest of the application. So you just break things into modules, right? So that's the whole concept of modularity. So DI promotes that modular what design. So that components, they're kind of just, they're not coupled, they're not tightly coupled, right? They're loose. And that helps you for you to be able to easily just replace them or update them, and it does not affect the rest of your application. Now, for testability as a benefit, right? When you inject dependencies, you can easily replace real dependencies with mock objects during your unit testing. We're going to learn unit testing, right? So this basically just allow you to isolate and test. You can test individual components. So we'll get to talk about unit testing definitely, right, in this cohort, right? So whenever you're injecting dependencies, you can actually just replace real ones with just mock objects during your unit what test, so that you can just isolate and test individual components to make sure that they are working as they should, right? Now for the maintainability, DI reduces tight coupling, right, between your components, right? It reduces tight coupling between your components. That means when it's tightly coupled, it means that there's a high level of dependency, right? High level of dependency in between two, objects or two components rather. So, and of course, if there is a high level of dependency between two components, it means that when you modify one, it greatly affects the other, right? So DI reduces that whole tight coupling between what components, and that makes it easier to maintain and extend your code base without affecting other parts of your application. And of course, flexibility, which is the last one. Of course, your dependencies can easily be swiped out, right? And this is actually very useful when you need to adapt your application to, new requirements. Of course, you notice that Android, the whole Android operating system, the whole Android, it's just it keeps growing, right? It keeps growing. So dependencies, you can actually just easily swap them out, right? And you, of course, when there's a new requirement or an integration with different libraries, so you can just swap them out. You can decide to actually just take out this and then use this. So it's actually what flexible. Dependency injection is flexible. Okay. Now to the next thing, right? The types of DI. So we have four types, right? We have the constructor injection. Now, the constructor injection in this particular type, what happens is this: your dependencies are passed to the dependent class, which is the client class, through its constructor, right? Through its constructor. Okay, so let's talk, right? Let's talk. So what is a constructor? What's the constructor? Somebody should help me out. Just say it anyhow you want to say it. What is a constructor? Let's start with that. Anybody? Or should I call somebody? Nobody. Or you have forgotten. You've used it and forgotten the definition or what it's about. Well, basically in programming, right, your constructor is just a special method within a class, right, that is automatically called when an instance of the class is created. Okay, so that's basically what the constructor is. It's actually a method, right? So, but it's a method within a class. So it is called automatically when you create an object or an instance of that class. And the primary purpose of your constructor is to just initialize, object attributes or properties, set up whatever initial values that the class actually requires, and perform any necessary setup tasks, right? So that's basically the primary reason for primary purpose rather of your constructor. So in constructor injection, right, your dependency is passed through the what passed to the dependent class, right, through its what constructor. Now the second one is the method injection, right? Here, just see, you pass dependencies are passed to the dependent class through what methods. That's just how it is. It's just so the whole types of DI is just how is this dependency injection actually passed. So it's passed through the constructor, passed through the method. Now it also passed through the what field, right? You can dependencies can be directly assigned to fields of a dependent class, but this is not actually recommend. Is less recommended because um, of the potential issues with tight coupling, right? Which I told you, tight coupling basically is just is a situation where two or more, right, components or even classes are highly dependent on each other, right? Highly dependent, and in such a design, right, in such a design that is the whole tight coupling, changes made to one component may just require corresponding changes in other components because they have this strong interconnection. So, and of course this definitely leads to a code that is difficult to maintain or modify or test, because you know that if you make changes here, you probably have to make changes in 20 something other places, in 35 other places, and a lot of that. So it's difficult to modify, right? So, and then of course the last one is the interface injection, right? So interface basically is just a blueprint, or some people say it's a contract, right? But it basically just defines a set of methods, right? And possibly properties, right? Of course, in some languages that a class must implement, like it must implement. So it specifies the structure that your class needs to follow, but doesn't really provide any implementation details in itself, right? That's basically an interface, which of course you know that, right? So you can also pass in your DI through an interface, right? You can pass in your DI through an interface. Okay, and then so these are the frameworks, right? The dependency injection frameworks that we have. We have the Dagger, we have Hilt, we have Coin, and we have Code In, right? So Dagger, of course, Dagger is popular, right? It's a compile time uh, DI framework, right? It actually generates efficient dependency injection code at compile time, right? At compile time. We have Hilt. Now, Hilt actually it's opinionated, right? In the sense that it's built on top of Dagger, right? So Hilt is actually built on top of Dagger, but it's designed specifically for Android app development. So that can also be used. Of course, you have Coin. Coin is lightweight. It's lightweight, and it simplifies DI with a focus on simplicity and ease of use. I kind of like the way it's actually been, explained, or how they introduce it. It's lightweight actually, right? And of course, Code In. It's also a lightweight DI framework with a Kotlin first approach. So you could use either of these ones, right? But we are going to be using Coin, right? We're going to be using Coin in our training, right? We're going to be making use of Coin, right? So that's actually dependency injection. One of the things I said is in our class, it's not much about, yes, we will build stuff, right? You get to get your hands dirty, but sometimes we have one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of persons in their learning curve or learning journey, they go straight into application. They go on YouTube, they start, how to build an app in 1 hour. They follow and they write codes and write codes. And for some of them, they can be smart enough to debug, right? But sometimes they don't really understand the concept, right? The underlying principles. Why is this thing important, right? And so that's one thing we are going to be doing a lot in the intermediate session, right? We're going to be going deep, getting to know these things, why it is important, right, before even getting into touching code. In fact, a lot of the building of or touching of code is going to be on you. Actually, a lot of it is going to be on you because, of course, the way I'm going to teach is if you are to come out as an intermediate person, right? I don't think I will need to spoon feed you. No, you need to be able to research. You need to be able to solve problems. You need to be able to figure things out. because that's what will make you stand out. Of course, if you get a job, right, you won't come back to me and say, excuse me, sir, I have this bug. You may not even have my number anymore, right? I may not even be reachable, right? At that point, it is you, your code, and Google, right? Of course, if you're very good in researching. So that's basically the concept of DI, right? Dependency injection, right? And why it is needed and a lot of that. So in our next class, we're going to implement it. Though definitely not in this class. We're going to implement it in our next class, right? In our notebook application. So I the one I actually started, not the one you're going to actually, so that you don't get to. I still need to be able to give people a task, right? So we'll implement that on a different application, right, in our next class, which is on Friday. But before then, for your task, right? Of course, if which you are, I know you are, right? You can actually just do the task before we even get to implementing DI. But of course, I'll still run that through. So your task is on two new branches called the FT MVVM and FT coin, right? In your notebook API. So first of all, set up MVVM to add and display dummy nodes in your FT MVVM what branch. Okay, so just this is just what I want. Just set up to add, just we did MVVM in our last class, right? So implement that on your own notebook application. And then of course, if you can do that before the class on Friday, that's also fine. Implement dependency injection using coin in your project, but create an FT coin branch for that. Okay, so that's basically that for today. Any question? Or our classes are going to be very, it's just going to, probably Fridays will be much longer, in our classes, right? We'll get to, maybe we'll talk about concepts, but not let's not make it as if it's going to be very predictable. So any questions before we call it timeout? Okay, so I'll take it that there is none. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this, your task is going to be, you're going to see that on the LMS, right, in the next 20 minutes, right?
Sorry,
Okay, go ahead.
okay, yeah, so this first is set up MVV to add and display dominoes in the FT and VM branch. I think is it something else except from what I did already? Because in my MVVM I added dominoes.
Okay, so you have done that already.
Yeah, I have like 5 nodes on my MVVM.
Okay, we hadn't gotten there yet, so you had added notes.
Oh,
Okay, that's
oh,
fine. No, that's
oh,
fine. So what I'll do is I'll add some more things to do to that, right? So that's fine. I'll add some more things. So
okay.
let's say add, if you added and you're displaying. So let's say, let me give you the whole okay. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry, I'll add a few things to that. So you also have something to do. But you can also
Okay,
start implementing the DI now.
okay. I just wanted to confirm that it was not something else.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So, but of course, once you see the task on the LMS, it may carry something much more I don't see much more than this, right? But this is basically just an overview. But that's fine. If you had already displayed notes, it means you have added dummy stuff. So, which is also like the first one. So that's fine. But of course, it was not on an MVVM branch.
No, no, it wasn't. So I should create
Yeah.
one now.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, so I think that's going to be all, right? So I'll see you guys on Friday and also on the workspace. Like I said, your task will drop at ASAP. So take, have a wonderful week, right? And see you on Friday.